Without losing any time, we would like to start our 21st panel, the 21st session. Our session title is The New Crisis of International System, COVID-19 Pandemic. We have 5 presentations. First one, please, by the way, forgive me because my incapability to pronounce the names correctly. China and global economic governance in post-C19, challenges and implications. Junuguru Srinivas will present this to us. Junuguru, please prepare your presentation. Second presentation will be again on COVID-19 pandemic and strategy of Russian authorities towards most mass media. Viktoriia Demydova will present this presentation. The third one on will be a data-based approach to global threats, case of Turkey, C19 experience. İsmailErkam, Sula, Mustafa, Onur, Yalçın will present this presentation. Fourth one, the help diplomacy as a form of public diplomacy, the case of Turkey during C19 pandemic, I mean COVID-19. Alper Çakmak will present. And the last one, Nationhood beyond boundaries during C19 on expression of NRI, voting and parliamentary representation of Indian diaspora. Ratna Bharati will present to us. I would not like to lose time. We will receive questions at the end of the session. The speakers have 10 to 12 minutes. Please, we will start according to order of the program. Junuguru Srinivas. If I pronounce the name correctly, please forgive me. Take the stage, please. You have 12 minutes. We are listening to.
Thank you so much. At the outset, let me extend my deep sense of gratitude to the Karatin Technical University for accepting my proposal and share, my views on this topic. Today, I am, going to present on China and global economic governance in post-COVID-19 challenges and implications. And the framework of the presentation is introduction, COVID-19 impact on international relations, theoretical underpinning, COVID-19 impact on global economy, China and global governance after the COVID-19 challenges, implication, and a future ahead. So in the introduction, at present, the global society is going through a devastating situation due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic affected more than 200 countries. It is shattering the entire world in a multi-dimensional way. COVID-19 has proven to be one of the greatest global challenges of this generation. A pandemic is not confined by national boundaries, and COVID-19 has tested the international resolve to cooperate. The pandemic disease caused by the novel coronavirus is a political problem as much as it is a public health tragedy. Politics has been at the core of how governments have prepared for and responded to this crisis. Meanwhile, the blame game spiraled across the world and accusing China of its lackadaisical approach towards COVID-19 pandemic containment in its initial stage. The reports are coming that China is facing its heat as China is getting cornered in international relations. Many global companies signal to shift their production base from China and look for alternative avenues. So COVID-19 impact on IR. So due to COVID-19, the liberal economic global order is in an advanced state of meltdown. Apart from that, the socio-economic and cultural exchanges come to halt. In fact, for the first time since the end of World War II, the world is divided into isolated pockets, focused much on self-preservation behind iron curtains of quarantine. The critical international relation concept like world order, the balance of power, and the traditional international relations concept like national security, national interest, and globalization are fundamentally reshaped. By the time we come out from the pandemic, we should witness diverse socio-political safety and the trade affairs of international relations. However, scholar Jacob rightly observed that many regional organizations had not performed better. For example, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi's initiative of cooperating during this pandemic drew less attention from other members of their nearly dead South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation group. So the progressive global group like EU was clueless while the virus disseminated across the region. The group of 7 major economies failed to organize a summit meeting in March 2020, while a subsequent meeting of their foreign minister came up with no more than any one statement seeking to foster research cooperation and do whatever is necessary to counter the economic fallout of the crisis, even as they disagreed on whether China was to blame for the onset of this crisis. So the G20 did not do much better. It did support debt relief for poor countries, but it's an announced $5 trillion US injection into the global economy was in fact no more than the sum of monies already committed by its individual members for themselves. The WHO Director General has continued to reiterate that global political cooperation, not isolationism, will be required to halt the spread of COVID-19. However, that did not happen. Okay, the WHO Director General has stated that politics and partisanship has made these things worse. A political solution will also be required to achieve international cooperation and solidarity. Not only a science solution and solidarity. So theoretical underpinning, I focused only on a realist approach and the liberal approach. So first, realist approach. So in the realist view, the basic principles of international politics never change. International affairs always remain essentially struggle for power among self-interested states. Since realism is not a unitary theory, different branches of realism rely on different independent variables. Classical realists like Hans Morgenthau see perpetual conflict rooted in an innately selfish human nature, which translates into competitive state behavior. Neorealists such as Kenneth Walls focus on an inherently competitive international system without a central organization authority that monopolizes power to manage interstate relations and protect states from one another. Realism is generally pessimistic about the prospects of cooperation and mutual support among states. It would immediately predict the national self-help and as first mentality that characterizes the global management of COVID-19 and its consequences. Travel and entry bans, international scapegoating, great power competition, and pharmaceutical patent protection are ubiquitous, because even in the world's most integrated supranational organization, the European Union member states readily violate otherwise sacrosanct principles of cooperation. As the outbreak was followed by immediate violation of many existing EU regulations, competition law, fiscal discipline, and the freedom of movement, as countries closed their borders, EU capitals went into full nationalist gear. Further, without any EU consultation process, a number of EU countries immediately closed their borders and decreased export bans. When Italy, one of the worst affected countries in the world, asked fellow EU members for emergency relief with critical medical supplies. For several weeks, it was met with precisely what realism would expect. Its neighbors violated the EU's single market spirit by decreasing export bans on pharmaceutical equipment. Indeed, the EU has not only been absent in terms of leadership, but has also actively engaged in nationalistic self-help at the expense of others. President Donald Trump of the United States, Europe's closest non-EU ally and partner, tried to lure CureVac, a German firm that was developing a promising COVID-19 vaccine technology, to relocate its COVID-19 research and development division to the US and to guarantee exclusive American access to the firm's products. Similarly, Trump sought to block the sale of market to Canada by a US-based firm. Okay, though a compromise was arrived later. So the US, like other countries, example Japan, has also sought to restructure global supply chains in order to bypass dependency on China, which, if it succeeds, will be radical and long-term change. Since time actually running fast, I think I should be faster, so I'm ignoring liberal approach. So basically, liberal approach try to talk about cooperation, international organization will play a significant role, trade play important role, and all. But then, like in short, the pattern is as in another area of contest between interdependent states. The as yet unfinished trade war between the US and China. The onset of pandemic has certainly produced unprecedented cooperation among epistemic communities such as virologists in transnationalized world, but not for the first time. Politics has trumped cooperation. The possibility of quantum leap in global scientific collaboration has been stymied by the China-US pact, which has reduced the prospect of shared funding and finance to fight the virus. The US, for instance, stopped funding of a critical coronavirus-related training program for Chinese and other scientists even before the current outbreak. National priorities have overridden collective action, which is entirely in accord with realistic expectations. Finally, a democracy is said to be a binding factor, at least among developed economies. This is largely true with respect to the relationship between democracy and war, but the evidence is not persuasive in the present context. Developed democratic states in Europe and North America engaged in recurring tug of war over the sharing of counter pandemic resources such as protective equipment and ventilators, and have done relatively little to take collective action. So the COVID-19 impact on global economy. So in the months since the COVID-19 outbreak was first diagnosed, it has been spread over, we know that, right? So estimates so far indicate the virus reduced global economic growth to an annualized rate of minus 4.5% to minus 6.0 in 2020, with a partial recovery of 2.5% to 5.2% projected for 2021. Major advanced economies, which comprise 60% of the global economic activity, are forecasted to operate below their potential output level through at least 2024. Compared to with synchronized nature of the global economic slowdown in the first half of 2020, the global economic showed signs of a two-track recovery in the third quarter of 2020, with the developed economies experiencing a nascent recovery and economic growth in developing economies lagging behind. So basically, Western countries also that we call advanced, they also are in deep trouble. This is the economic fallout from the pandemic could risk continued labor delocations as a result of lingering high levels of unemployment, not re-experienced since the Great Depression of the 1930s, and high levels of debt among developing economies. So job loss have been concentrated more intensively in the services sector, where workers have been...
You have last 2 minutes, please summarize. And
yeah, sure, sir. So basically, China and the global governance after the COVID-19. However, multilateralism has been in crisis long before the actually growing discontent with globalization has been associated with the failure of the multilateral system to stem the tide of rising inequality, social fragmentation, and job insecurity heightened by technological change. So there are like several kind of changes have been taking place due to this thing. Political disparities in multilateral organizations such as IMF, World Bank, UN, and the World Trade Organization have prevented adequate reform. Disillusionment with the existing multilateral system has promoted various alternative visions, such as replacing multilateral agreements and rules with bilateral deals of groupings of like-minded or geographically proximate countries. That these alternative approaches cannot adequately replace true multilateralism, since a world facing inherently global challenges, as evidenced by the COVID-19 pandemic. For the global south, the consequences of weak multilateralism on climate change, trade, conflict prevention, and countless other issues are particularly high. So again, this backdrop, the great powers face the risk of moving towards confrontation as opposed to multilateral approach that would fragment the world into rival blocs. A world in which rival great powers, particularly the United States and China, seek to protect their own space of influence through its own rules and standards, could strip smaller and poorer countries from having agency or space to maneuver. This would fail to provide the type of solution needed for today's global problems. Furthermore, the direction of the rivalrous relation between the US and China take will have implications for all nations. So challenges, like there are several challenges because many countries are facing, first and foremost, we need to reform the existing global governance. Otherwise, country will focus only on their own economy. That will have a larger implication, particularly social, political, cultural, and large-scale implication. So in the conclusion, though we had seen the gloomy picture of IR since last 1 year, however, since recent many countries have been displayed cooperation in containing the pandemic. For instance, India has exported COVID-19 vaccine to 80 countries. Likewise, the US also called for active cooperation with the EU and other like-minded nations. However, the rivalry between the US and China may go on, as the US is giving a lot of importance to the Quad group to counter the China's dominance in Asia-Pacific region. So there is a possibility for dwindling of global South concept from the IR discourse, as India foreign policy slowly tilting towards the US. For instance, India actively participating in Quad activities. Anyways, disease outbreak reveals strains on collective governance. At least now, the post-war established global institutions like the UNSC, IMF, World Bank, WTO should be reformed soon and encourage all countries to surface their concerns for collective benefit. Because Sarah E. Davis, Claire observed that politics drive epidemics. So finally, all countries should fight collectively on any future ensuing scourges without undermining its national interests for mutual benefit. For that, the collaboration between countries should be enhanced more. Thank you so much, and I'm really sorry for extending time limit.
We thank you, Srinivas, for your informative presentation. As you very well know, all of us very well know, authoritarian states always rule the crisis easier, but the human rights, legalization, justice, always a big, grave problem in authoritarian states. China facing and is a good example of this. I would like to make a change. If Viktoriia, Demydova, forgive me, I would like to give stage to Mustafa Onur Yalçın because he has some connection problems, and his connection is well now. Is it a problem for you, Viktoriia, if I change your place? Thank you very much. Then,
thank you for your consideration.
Wait, excuse me?
Thank you for your consideration. Thank you.
Okay, Mustafa. Yes, Mustafa, it is your stage that are based.
Okay. Just let me open my presentation. Just
okay.
A minute.
Stage and
okay. Can you see now? Okay. Hi everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Mustafa Onur Yalçın, and today I will be presenting our ongoing research with my co-author and my advisor, Dr. İsmailErkam, which is titled as the database approach to the global threats. So here you can see the content of the study. First, I will introduce the focus of the study and then briefly talk about the Turkey's COVID-19 experience and tell the details of our data set. In the last part, I will conclude with a few words on our preliminary findings and why we think a database analysis is important. So we started this study with the question of whether there is a difference between the threats that actually exist and the threats that states perceive. The main focus of this research is to track down the transformation of the global security risks in the post-Cold War era. And we know that most of the global risks are side effects of the progress that humanity has experienced in the last century. But the modern society has developed global governance mechanisms like institutions, organizations, and regimes to deal with these catastrophic risks. Yet the global governance mechanisms have been in a crisis in the recent decades, especially with the latest pandemic. And the COVID-19 has become a test case for the global governance. The world is trying to solve the global issues within local measures, but the threats are global, yet the solutions and responses are local. So our aim here is to prepare a data set that contains the global risk and challenges which are mentioned in the reports of various IGOs and NGOs like UN Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, World Bank, World Economic Forum, and so on. Currently, we plan to collect the data from the annual reports that contain information on the global risk and challenges. So the preliminary findings show that certain risks have been increasingly taking part as early warnings in these institutions' reports, yet states did not take any or enough precautions. So this brings us to the case of this study, which contains our assessment on how states, and into this case Turkey, are ill-prepared to deal with these transforming threats and our suggestions for the improvement of these responses. So recent pandemic showed that nation states still use their status reflex of seeking local solutions to the global threats, but these reflexes remain insufficient, preventing human suffering. Turkey also goes with this trend to control the pandemic, which can be seen in the Minister of Health's catchphrase, "The problem is global and our struggle is national." As most of us has been experiencing through the last last 2 years, Turkey's pandemic experience has a lot of ups and downs. And in the early phases of the pandemic, the Ministry of Health must rely on the nation's social healthcare system, which was supposed to handle the spread of the disease. And to tell the truth, no one expected pandemic to last years, and we were not prepared for a full-scale struggle. And there were a lot of unexpected lockdowns to control the virus and the problems about vaccine supply and many other issues. Well, one thing is certain that, like the most of the world, Turkey also was not prepared for a long-lasting pandemic. So, but along with the domestic issues, Turkey has also played another role in the international area. First one is foreign aid. Turkey sent medical and financial aid to the various countries in the early stages of the pandemic, which is important in terms of Turkey's promoting global cooperation. Because in the further stages of the pandemic, government officials and President Erdogan stated that it is important for different actors in international system to think and act together in order to produce solutions to global scale problems. And this is possible with innovative approach to the diplomacy. Ministry of Foreign Affairs' latest initiative, Enterprising and Humanitarian Foreign Policy, also suits well within the global cooperation vision to overcome the pandemic. However, this brings the debate about how academic works are ineffective in terms of influencing the policy-making processes. This is the main motivation behind the global risk assessment dataset, because we believe that the policy-making on global issues should be based on scientific data, and most efficient way to do so is preparing database researches. So this brings us to our dataset. We call it GRAD. GRAD is a comprehensive dataset that we collected to track down the transformation risks and challenges. It contains data on major catastrophic threats against the humanity, grouped under 6 different headings, which are development, economy, health, nuclear power, artificial intelligence, and the environment. The data is collected with the content analysis methods from the reports published at various intervals between 1919 and 2020 by IGOs and NGOs you can see in the presentation. And what we are trying to do here is to create an accessible and regularly updated data set about the global risks, which is fully based on the scientific reports. So we believe that this issue needs scholarly attention, and a database analysis may open a new path for the gap between academic work and the policy-making process. But this brings the question of why GRAD and database-based analysis is important. The raw data presented and used in the study is based on the annual reports prepared by the various experts within the scope of the specific institutions. But this data need to be processed in a scholarly manner to be used in most effective way possible. Therefore, GRAD may serve as an organized hub for disorganized information about these global risks. Our preliminary findings of our ongoing data collection show that the huge portion of the global risks requires collective efforts to be managed or even be prevented. Because according to the reports that we have been examining, these threats have existed before, and the scientists have been warning about a possible pandemic and many other global threats. And the COVID-19 is just the tip of the iceberg, because there are many other issues need scholarly attention, like nuclear threats, uncontrolled armament and militarization, threats to the peacekeeping, socioeconomic risks, environmental threats, and so on. And our purpose here is to create accessible and regularly updated data set that contains categorized versions of these catastrophic issues. Our data collection currently in progress and will be updated and expanded with the new reports. And also, since the data set will be an accessible source, many different studies can be produced from the graph. And lastly, a couple of words on the Turkey's experience again. To achieve the latest diplomatic goal and policy-making process should use scientific data. Yes, we promote here, GRAD to be a comprehensive source, but what needs to be done is to promote these kind of methods. And that is all I have to say right now. As I said earlier before, our study is still in work in progress. Therefore, any comment, critique, and feedback will be welcomed. Thank you for your patience and attention.
Mustafa, we thank you for your timely presentation. And I hope you will enlarge your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
And COVID-19 has not been ended yet. So it is an ongoing process. Most probably new data will come out. Yes, it is Viktoriia Demydova's turn. COVID-19, again, pandemic and strategy of Russian authorities towards mass media. Yes, Viktoriia, you have 12 minutes. Please take the stage. We are listening to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
We hear you. We see your screen.
You see my screen? Is it full screen or is it okay?
We see your presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. So, Assistant Professor Dr. Viktoriia Demydova. I work at Istanbul Girişim University Political Science and International Relations Department. And today my presentation will be devoted to Russian government's measures during COVID pandemic, particularly measures adopted towards mass media in Russia. Well, what is the problem of this research? Well, first of all, we have to remember that pandemic. The first cases in Russia were recorded in the end of January 2020. And during the whole period, I mean, till today, let's say, or till the beginning of September, Russian government faced the following considerations. So on the one hand, government had the need to inform people about virus itself, about measures to stop or to curb it, about vaccination. On the other hand, Russian government faced the need to fight against disinformation or fake news, because COVID dissidents, there are a lot in Russia. And finally, since COVID pandemic also is about economic crisis, Russian government faced the need to support mass media, especially print one, financially. Also, we have to take into consideration two important factors. These are numerous measures like self-isolation, bans on mass actions, days off announced in 2020. And on the other hand, we have to consider upcoming parliamentary election in Russia. Well, this research concentrates on the time period between March 2020 and September 2029. I take into consideration only domestic politics. So I'm not talking about disinformation as a foreign policy strategy of Russian Federation. This is a separate area that needs detailed analysis. As I said, I analyzed three areas that you can see here. I rely on qualitative methodology, mostly on the analysis of the official documents. My research question is about the impact of the COVID pandemic on the Russia's leadership's policies towards media. Well, what I'm trying to argue in this research is that, yes, considerations of the public health, economic crisis in Russia may demand or may determine certain policies adopted. But at the same time, this COVID pandemic was a nice chance for the Russian government, a nice chance to limit freedom of media, a nice chance to limit liberal media, liberal opposition. And why it was useful? Because, different bans, different self-isolation measures adopted in Russia, they basically impeded people from participating in mass actions. We cannot say that Russian government kept people uninformed about the developments in the country. No, there was official website created, so it's in Russian, Stop Coronavirus. RF created by government. Well, you can see statistics. Basically, it's very similar to the one that we see in Turkey each and every evening. Basic information about coronavirus, about pandemic, about vaccination, about measures of the government, about support. Of course, this is very important. Government provides support to the people, and so on and so on. Also international data from different universities. So there is a source of information. But we have to remember that Russian government, as I argued in the beginning, we have to remember that Russian government controls media severely in Russia, and not only during COVID pandemic, but during pandemic period, it was seen even more. Generally, media freedom does not exist in Russia, or we can say that it's very poor. And Russian government has two main tools of the fight against liberal opposition, civil society and media. These are two laws adopted in 2012, foreign agent law, that basically deals with the foreign funding of the NGOs, of the actors, and law on extremism. Law that, for instance, prohibits research on Nazi-Soviet cooperation or victims of famine in Ukraine during the Soviet Union, and so on and so on. So basically very vague, very useful tools. But during this period of COVID pandemic, those documents were updated. Shortly after arrest of Alexei Navalny, chief opposition leader in Russia, in January 2021, few months after his arrest and imprisonment, his anti-corruption foundation, that is a very nice kind of source of information about Russian domestic policies, it was recognized extremist. Content was also added to the list of the extremist materials in Russia. Two very important and very interesting liberal media outlets. Meduza, this is a Riga-based media outlet that is very popular on Instagram, particularly, and Dost channel, they were recognized foreign agents. So they're treated correspondingly. On the other hand, we have legislation, a package of laws that were adopted, you can see in different periods, but mostly in December 2020, and separate package, I will show you the separate package of the laws on the internet that actually squeeze Russian media. So this is the law on disrespect to authorities, very general, because everything, even criticism of the official statistics on the COVID cases, number of deaths, can be treated as disrespect to authorities. Individuals can be recognized as foreign agents, so not necessarily NGOs, not necessarily institutions. Slander also can be punished. There is a criminal responsibility for that. So government's policies during COVID cannot be criticized. There are serious limitations on the work of the journalists were introduced. For instance, journalists cannot participate and cannot organize mass actions in Russia. This document was actually inspired by the protests in Belarus, on the one hand. On the other hand, another factor, these were protests in support of Alexei Navalny in different years till January 2021. And one of the recent documents, this is a law on educational activities that came into force on the 1st of June, that actually severely limits different educational activities, but it's very unclear which ones, because it may include blogs about the healthy way of life, it may include blogs that criticize or just explain the nature of Russian political system and the work of the Russian official institutions. As I said, internet, we can observe the process that is called sovereignization of the internet. Russian government sees internet as an actor. So internet is not free, but it's controlled by the Russian government. There is a coordination and observation committee controlled by Roskomnadzor in Russia, and they regulate each and every aspect of the internet, of the web, according to the Russian legislation. They introduced new legislation to control it. So there is, for instance, one of the recent laws include the law on sanctions against censorship of the Russian media. What does it mean? It's targeted against Western platforms like Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, when they are trying to remove content produced by Russian propaganda channels, for instance, Russia Today. So Russian government is ready to slow down traffic on those platforms as a response to their attempt to limit Russian propaganda. Internet sovereignty law, the thing that I already mentioned. So internet is controlled by the state in Russia, and law on social networks content that initially was to protect children from pornography, propaganda of alcohol, smoking, gambling, and so on. But one of 8 provisions contain the provision. So it actually asks owners of the networks to remove content related to extremism, content that calls citizens and activists to participate in mass actions or violate Russian law. So we see that internet is a separate actor. Another aspect of this access to information issue, this is access to the leader himself or the information that comes from the leader. The thing is that leaders of all countries, they try to meet their citizens, they try to support their citizens, but for a very long time between March and September 2020, for instance, Russian President Putin did not show up on the public. Even vaccination that happened in summer, in June, I think, was not on public. Putin did not disclose which vaccine he actually preferred. Russian public reacted immediately, and the rating of his support dropped to 59. That is quite a low, and there is historical record. I'm sorry. So the second aspect that I want to talk about, this is the war on disinformation. So basically it started in 2019 when Russia adopted a law on fake news. Two waves of the fake news related to COVID pandemic in Russia can be seen as, spread of COVID related to those 5G towers. As a coincidence, or there is a certain correlation. So it was the first myth or rumor among Russian COVID dissidents. And the second wave was related to vaccination. People, Russian people online especially, they are very much opposing vaccination. Legislation on fake news. Earlier, it was actually conducted according to the administrative code and the criminal code. In April 2020, the criminal code was amended, and now there is a criminal responsibility for the fake news up to 5 years and up to 2 million ruble in case if it leads to the death of the people. But we have to remember that while Russia is fighting with disinformation, on the international stage, it's a source of disinformation itself. Finally, the third issue that I have to mention, this is support to media. So before I proceed with the actual support topic, I want to say that, TV is TV is the most popular source of information, news about Russia or about the world for Russians. You can see the second and third place belong correspondingly to social media.
Please summarize and conclude.
Okay, but you can see that the trust is decreasing slowly. Well, support to media. Why? Support especially was provided for print media because they suffered a lot from the crisis. So we can talk about, you can see statistics provided by the Digital Ministry of Russia. They provided subsidies that are available, applications are available on their website. There is an increase in the state budget, federal budget, for those purposes. Particularly, there is support for cinema and IT sector, because Russian government is trying to to use digital platforms and trying to promote Russian creators of the software. And finally, when it comes to digital platforms, Russian government is responsible for the creation of the social internet. So they listed in 2021, they listed almost 400 sources, access to which is free in Russia, but you can see that there, significant number of them are actually propaganda outlets. So let me sum up. I apologize for being late. Let me sum up. So we can see that we analyzed the three most important areas of Russian policies towards media during COVID pandemic. So access to information, we see that media and access to information in Russia, they are controlled by the government and they're severely limited. But on the one hand, we can see that some measures can be caused by the needs of pandemic itself. For instance, law on the fake news, because really some content on social media causes panic among the people. And so people prefer to stay away from the vaccination. At the same time, we can see that Russian government used the chance when people were locked, when people did not have access to certain sources, so to squeeze media further. Well, we can see that both sides, Russian opposition and Russian government, is using more and more digital platforms, and Russian government is trying to explore new platforms of its activism. We can see the process of sovereignization of the internet when it's being controlled by the government in the same way like any other sector in Russia, and we can see the process of securitization when internet, as one of the previous participants of the conference noted, that security in the internet, this is a very important part. Thank you very much. I'm sorry for being
Okay, we thank you. Thank you very much. The COVID pandemic helped authoritarian states to use it as an excuse to tighten the society, to tighten their rule on society. Russia is one of the examples. China is another example. If there is any question, we'll receive the questions at the end of the session. The next, topic of us, health diplomacy as a form of public diplomacy. The case of Turkey during C-19 pandemic. Alper Çakmak will present us. Alper Çakmak, it's your stage, please.
Thank you very much, İsmailErkam. This is Alper Çakmak from Acıbadem University, Foreign Languages and Department. Many thanks for the opportunity to present my presentation here. Sorry, I need to just go there. Yeah. Firstly, I would like to focus on the cultural resources of the Turkish public diplomacy. The first cultural resource is the Ottoman heritage, which is the benevolence or beneficence, that we like helping other people. And the model, it provides a moral motivation, developing the ways to support the neighbors and the relatives. It's also in part, a defense of the universal human rights. It also has implications for the modern times. So this role is carved by contributing to the honor of the humanity. And humanitarian diplomacy, it creates an active role in appeasing the refugee dramas, just like the Syrian refugees in Turkey. Like we are hosting like more than 4 million refugees, Syrian refugees in Turkey, and open door policy till now, at least, an understanding of history molded with mercy and compassion. This heritage comes from the Ottoman heritage. Another one is the faith-based Turkish public diplomacy and the notion of Islamic Brotherhood. These are the NGOs or state-based organizations that are very active in Africa, in Caucasia, and in different parts of the world, mostly fraught with tensions such as civil unrest, political turmoil, or natural disasters. And they provide also information to the Turkish government. They involve in relief and revealing information activities and help overcome humanitarian tragedies. And these institutions, these organizations have religious motivations too. Another religious motivation behind the humanitarian aid is this surah or ayah in the Quran, Al-Anfal, the 8, 74 and 75. As you may see, the ones who look for a shelter are the ones that need to be helped. This creates another religious motivation. The Quran and the creates another Islam. It creates another factor for the government whose underpinning are the ideologies and Islamist ideology. The hadith of the Prophet Muhammad, a believer is like a brick for another and the one supporting the other, is another motivation. We are all angels with only one wing and we can fly only by embracing each other. The Mevlana Celaleddin Rumi's words. Also the ancient Anatolian culture that is merged with the Islamic culture, like we call it Tanrı misafiri, the guest of God, which comes from actually the Greek mythology, because the guest might be a god or guest might be a normal person. So you have to treat that person very well. So this is another source that's also merged with the Islamic culture, because it's compatible with the Islamic culture. And another one is we have a saying in Turkish, which is interpret each happening favorably, comprehend each night as if it was Laylat el-Qadr, and each guest as if she or she were Hızır. Another motivation to help what I mean is humanitarian help during the COVID-19 is, or in general, is the kinship solidarity. When we say the kinship solidarity, we actually mean the Central Asian and Caucasian states, especially. And these people are actually, in our political discourse and in our political narrative, are called the kidnapped brothers that are kidnapped from the main body. Before the pandemic, what is the frame for the Turkish public diplomacy and Turkish humanitarian aid? We see a very limited cooperation with non-Muslim and developed partners, which is going to change during the COVID-19 process. Muslim countries and poorer echelons of the world are the general targets of the Turkish public diplomacy and Turkish humanitarian aid. Public works, infrastructure works, sustainability works were all, and exchange programs, especially in higher education, and social construction projects were all aimed to tighten the ties or improve the ties between Turkey and the Muslim countries and the poorer echelons of the world. During the pandemic has bracketed out glaring deficiencies in the healthcare system, not only in low-level income countries, but also high-level ones. It generated an kind of environment of scarce sources like masks or health equipment, and Turkey started to develop some humanitarian aid programs for the countries, such as United States, which has never been the case before the pandemic, United Kingdom and Israel. And in order to actually improve, or in order to help Turkey's image in the eyes of the publics, maybe foreign publics, maybe the domestic publics, we are also going to talk about it, and fostering the image of the generous donor and powerful country, generous state, generous country, or a powerful country. So this pandemic process has unraveled an opportunity to study for the first time Turkey's public diplomacy and Turkey's humanitarian aid as a form of public diplomacy to the non-Muslim and also developed countries. They should be non-Muslim and developed countries if we are going to ask a research question here. Another type of relationship building has been unraveled here. These are the list of the countries. I'm not going to go over them. I'm not going to bore you here. Turkey has sent a plane load of personal protective equipment to support intensive healthcare sector in system of the United States, and 500,000 surgical masks, 4,000 overall, 2,000 bottles of disinfectant. All different types of healthcare equipment have been sent to the developed and non-Muslim countries. And Turkey has started to create an image, especially in the eyes of the domestic audience, in the eyes of the domestic electorate, a generous provider of needs, a country which is in control of a variable environment. These are the upper high-income countries, upper middle-income countries, lower middle-income countries, and low-income countries that have received Turkish humanitarian assistance during COVID-19. These are the I have tried to create a taxonomy of cultural resources behind Turkish humanitarian assistance, and as I have mentioned before, there are some factors like kinship, Muslim brotherhood, former Ottoman lands, and contemporary values. And this is something new during the COVID-19, especially when it comes to the developed and non-Muslim countries, not Philippines or Uganda, but especially UK, United States, Israel, Poland, these countries. And beyond the medical supplies, we have the issue of expatriates. Expatriates is a good exemplary form of showing how strong your country is, because Ukraine, Argentina, and Ukrainian citizens, or Albanian, Georgians, were students in Wuhan, were all extracted by the help of Turkey, which has really contributed to the image of Turkey that with the help of Turkish Airlines, which is one of the most famous company in Turkey, with the help of such a company, Turkey is able to extract 70,000 people from 107 countries. Not only its own citizens, by the way, also Ukrainians, Albanians, and Georgians, and also Argentinians. When it comes to the conclusive remarks, what I mean is the humanitarian aid during the COVID-19 merges the Islamic civilization, glorified Ottoman history, and kinship with contemporary values. Contemporary values is the part that is the new part here. And the civilized diplomacy is exerted to attract, persuade, and change the minds of its target audience. Target audience is the foreign public. However, there are some problems that I'm going to mention in a minute. It's empowered by the culture that comes from the Ottoman heritage, the values that are the Islamic values, the ideas, as I have mentioned before, the ideological underpinning of the leader, Erdogan, and the AK Party, cadres, and the sympathy of foreign governments' constituencies. And the COVID-19 process has produced positive momentum that could be used to enhance Turkey's image. It was perceived as a momentum, and health diplomacy has started to be used as a form of public diplomacy, as the aim of public diplomacy basically is to change the mind of the other people. And it's no longer monopolized by the nation with the biggest army, but with the best story, with the side with the best story wins the war here. And this public diplomacy type, health diplomacy, is eligible to create a good story for Turkey. Yes, please.
Go on, please. Yes.
Okay. Every state is governed by self-interest. This is no surprise. Turkey is no exception. And humanitarian aid is becoming a part of public diplomacy, is also a action of a nation state seeking its own national interests. It's trying to maximize its own national interest, and improving its image in the eyes of the foreign public is on behalf of, and it's beneficial for Turkey's national interests. So these cannot be told apart from each other. Another message that is given here is humanitarian aid is no longer monopolized by the West. When you look at humanitarian aid published by United Nations, and it is no surprise that UK and USA has the first and the second place in this list. But During the COVID-19 process, Turkey has stepped onto the first. And Turkey expects its humanitarian assistance to yield a return on its investment and counteract its negative image. And it creates a kind of moral authority, and it introduces a kind of moral authority into the international relations through the use of its history, values, and culture of the country. The highest distinction conferred on Turkey by other countries is the moral authority, which is prioritizing the human life during the pandemic. Justice and the Development Party has always, in its discourse and its narrative, has tried to show that we are the grandsons of Ottomans. It's especially a message given in domestic politics. And when we look at the populist leaders in the world, like Trump, we have seen that they have tried to satisfy their image of the superhero. The superhero image, or the...
Dr. Çakmak, please summarize and conclude.
In 2 minutes.
Yes, 1 minute.
Okay, thank you. The demise of the public diplomacy is exacerbated by populism. The competition of the leaders, we have seen the competition of the leaders, just like Mustafa Bey has already mentioned, the competition of the leaders with superhero complex to promote the image of the self and as the savior of the hardest hit areas. And this, what I mean is, this humanitarian aids try to give the image that we are still the grandsons of the Ottomans. We are still the generous country. We can help even the developed and non-Muslim countries during an environment in which the world is in turmoil. And it's not only a message, it's not only a public diplomacy for the foreign audience, but also a kind of public diplomacy work for the domestic audience. It's not only it's not aimed only to improve its image in the eyes of the public audience, but also the domestic audience. I would like to thank you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you very much.
We thank you for your informative presentation. We enjoyed your presentation as we enjoyed Srinivas, Demydova, and Yalçın's presentations. The last presentation will be on Nationhood Beyond Boundaries during C19 on expansion of NRI voting and parliamentary representation of Indian diaspora. Ratna, Bharati B. will present to us. Yes, Ratna. Hi. Please take the stage. We thank you, Ratna. It was a fruitful and informative presentation. Our session is over, but if is there any question, we may take some questions. Is there anyone who would like to ask a question? Please raise your hand if you want to ask. I think all presentations were so clear and informative that no questions needed. Then I conclude the session because there is no question. And I thank you, all of you, for your presentations, for your information given us on COVID pandemic. Announcement will be given by the organizing committee. I think there will be a small interruption on Zoom recording. Yes, please give us announcement.